Ladies and gentlemen, today I want to share with you something that might not come up in our daily conversations but holds a deep significance in how we lead our lives. It's about boundaries, values, and the standards we set for ourselves. The topic is 8 things you should never receive from anyone. In our journey through life, respect stands as one of the most essential pillars of all meaningful relationships. Whether in friendships, family bonds, or romantic partnerships, respect is a fundamental value that shapes how we interact with one another. However, far too often, people endure situations where they are subjected to disrespect in various forms from those they trust or care for. Disrespect, whether intentional or not, can have profound effects on our well-being and mental health. More importantly, accepting disrespect in any form sets a dangerous precedent that diminishes our self-worth and undermines our boundaries. Disrespect manifests in numerous ways, each of which can be damaging to a person's emotional, psychological, and even physical well-being. The most obvious form of disrespect is verbal abuse, which often includes insults, belittling comments, or demeaning language aimed at reducing the value of a person. This kind of behavior can often be justified by the perpetrator as joking or just telling the truth, but in reality, it's a deliberate attack on one's dignity. Over time, repeated verbal disrespect can erode self-esteem, leaving a person feeling powerless, worthless, and unseen. Physical disrespect, including pushing, shoving, or any form of physical intimidation, is another form that no one should ever have to experience. Unlike verbal disrespect, physical disrespect is overt, and its impact is often more immediate. It's not just a violation of personal boundaries, it's an invasion of safety and trust. Accepting physical disrespect or even minimizing its significance can send a message that physical harm is somehow acceptable or excusable, which is never the case. In relationships where physical disrespect exists, it's important to recognize the danger it presents, not only to one's physical health, but also to their emotional and psychological state. Then there is emotional disrespect, a form that is often subtler but no less damaging. Emotional disrespect can include manipulation, control, and neglect of one's feelings. It can manifest as someone ignoring your needs, dismissing your emotions, or using your vulnerabilities against you. In emotionally disrespectful situations, individuals might be gaslighted, made to question their own reality, or told that their feelings are invalid or exaggerated. This form of disrespect is often tricky to recognize because it is often wrapped in the guise of care or concern. However, emotional disrespect over time can cause long-lasting damage to one's mental health, contributing to anxiety, depression, and a general sense of inadequacy. When we accept emotional disrespect, we allow ourselves to be trapped in relationships that undermine our emotional stability and self-assurance. There is also the pervasive form of disrespect known as neglect. Neglect occurs when someone fails to meet basic emotional or physical needs. In a friendship or partnership, this could involve a lack of attention, care, or consideration for someone's feelings or needs. In a familial context, it could mean that your presence, opinions, or contributions are continuously overlooked or ignored. Neglect makes individuals feel invisible or unimportant. When we accept neglect, we are telling others that our value is conditional or that we are only worthy of care when it's convenient for them. This can result in feelings of abandonment, loneliness, and frustration. No one should ever have to feel that their existence is not enough to warrant respect, care, or attention. At the heart of all forms of disrespect lies an abuse of power. Disrespect often occurs when one person attempts to assert dominance or control over another. This could be in the form of manipulation, bullying, or intimidation, where the person being disrespected feels powerless, helpless, or inferior. It's a distortion of relationships where one person is constantly put in a position of subordination or fear. Accepting disrespect in these forms allows unhealthy power dynamics to flourish, creating an environment where the person on the receiving end of disrespect feels continuously diminished. Over time, this damages their confidence and can even make them question their worth and right to have boundaries. The importance of not accepting disrespect cannot be overstated. When we allow others to treat us poorly, we are telling them that it is okay to continue their behavior. Accepting disrespect doesn't just affect our relationships with others, it directly impacts our relationship with ourselves. Our self-worth is not determined by the opinions or actions of others, but by how we see ourselves and the boundaries we set for the treatment we accept. If we continually allow ourselves to be disrespected, we may begin to internalize these negative behaviors, questioning our value and deservingness of respect. Over time, this can erode the sense of self we've worked so hard to build, leaving us vulnerable to even more mistreatment. It's crucial to recognize that accepting respect doesn't make us weak or submissive. It makes us strong and self-aware. It shows that we are confident in our boundaries and that we will not tolerate anything less than the basic decency we deserve. Saying no to disrespect is a form of self-preservation. It is not about rejecting others, but about respecting ourselves enough to demand the same from those around us. The people we choose to keep in our lives must also respect us, our values, and our individuality. If they fail to do so, it is important to reassess whether these relationships are worth continuing. No relationship, no matter how close, should ever come at the cost of your mental, emotional, or physical well-being. Disrespect, in any form, should never be accepted from anyone. We must recognize its many manifestations, from verbal abuse to emotional neglect, and stand firm in demanding respect from those around us. Accepting disrespect only diminishes our sense of self-worth and perpetuates harmful behavior that damages relationships. By setting clear boundaries and refusing to tolerate disrespect, we protect our mental health and nurture our personal growth. Our value is not contingent on how others treat us, but on how we treat ourselves and the standards we set. It's time to break free from relationships that bring us down and embrace those that uplift, empower, and respect us for who we truly are. In life, we often encounter situations where people attempt to manipulate or control our emotions and decisions, frequently using guilt as a tool to achieve their own goals. This form of emotional manipulation is harmful and can leave deep scars if left unchecked. Guilt trips are a form of psychological pressure that aim to induce feelings of shame, inadequacy, or obligation, all with the intent of making you feel responsible for something that isn't your fault or to make you act against your best interests. It's crucial to understand how damaging this tactic can be and why it's something that should never be received from anyone regardless of the relationship. Guilt is a powerful emotion that, when used manipulatively, can make someone feel compelled to do things they might not want to do. It can come in many forms, from passive-aggressive remarks to direct statements like, "I did this for you, and this is how you repay me," or "if you really loved me, you would do this." Such statements place the burden of responsibility on the person being manipulated, implying that their actions or lack thereof are a reflection of their character or level of care. By using guilt as a means of persuasion, the manipulator deflects responsibility for their own actions, making the victim feel as though they owe something that they are not morally obligated to give. This tactic is often seen in close relationships, whether romantic, familial, or friendships, where one person attempts to make the other feel like they are failing in some way. For example, a parent may use guilt to control a child's behavior by saying, "After everything I've done for you, this is how you treat me," or "I gave up so much for you, and this is how you repay me." Such words plant the idea that the child owes their parent in a way that is disproportionate to the situation, creating an unhealthy dynamic that can last well into adulthood. Similarly, in romantic relationships, one partner may use guilt to get the other to do something they otherwise would not, leveraging phrases like, "If you truly cared about me, you would do this," or "I'm so disappointed in you." The manipulator exploits the other person's empathy and sense of responsibility, twisting their emotions to coerce them into compliance. Guilt trips often target a person's values, playing on their sense of morality, obligation, or love. They cause the recipient to question their own decisions, making them second-guess whether they are in the wrong, even when they are not. This creates a distorted view of right and wrong, where the victim starts to feel that their autonomy is secondary to someone else's needs or desires. They might start to believe that their feelings, wants, or boundaries are irrelevant compared to what the other person expects of them. This kind of manipulation can undermine confidence and self-respect over time, making the person feel that they are never doing enough or that they are always falling short. The emotional toll of guilt manipulation is severe. It leads to an erosion of self-esteem as the person begins to internalize the guilt and believe they are inherently selfish or uncaring. They may become anxious, stressed, or even resentful as they constantly feel the weight of unspoken obligations. In extreme cases, they might even begin to sacrifice their own happiness and well-being to avoid the guilt or to appease the manipulator. This creates a dangerous cycle in which the person is constantly giving of themselves without ever feeling that their needs are being met or that their feelings are being respected. Beyond emotional damage, guilt trips also take a toll on one's mental health. People who are consistently subjected to this kind of manipulation often struggle with feelings of powerlessness and confusion. They might feel trapped in situations where they have to constantly weigh whether their decisions will disappoint others or cause guilt. Over time, this can result in depression, anxiety, and a general sense of being overwhelmed by the demands placed upon them. This manipulation also fosters a sense of dependency, where the victim becomes conditioned to prioritize others' needs at the expense of their own. Their value is no longer defined by their own desires or actions, but by how much they can sacrifice to meet the expectations of others. What makes guilt trips particularly insidious is their ability to disguise themselves as concern or care. The manipulator often masks their emotional coercion as an expression of love or a request that appears harmless. For instance, a person might say, "I just want what's best for you," or "I only want to help," while subtly implying that failure to comply will have consequences, either for the manipulator or the relationship. The victim might feel as though they have no choice but to comply, as if refusing would somehow make them a bad person. This makes it difficult for the victim to recognize the manipulation for what it is, because it is often wrapped in the language of love and concern. One of the most important things to recognize when dealing with guilt manipulation is that it is not a sign of love, but rather a red flag indicating an unhealthy power dynamic. Love, in its purest form, should not involve coercion or manipulation. True love and care respect boundaries and encourage open, honest communication. No one should be made to feel guilty for asserting their own needs or making decisions that align with their well-being. Guilt manipulation may create temporary compliance, but it destroys trust, erodes respect, and leaves lasting emotional scars. It is a toxic tactic that keeps individuals trapped in a cycle of pleasing others at the expense of their own happiness. The key to breaking free from guilt manipulation is to recognize it early and set firm boundaries. It's essential to remember that you are under no obligation to accept someone else's emotional manipulation. When you feel guilty for no reason, or when others attempt to guilt you into doing something, stop and evaluate the situation. Ask yourself whether the request is fair, whether your feelings are being respected, and whether you are being asked to act against your best interests. Trust your instincts. Healthy relationships are built on mutual respect, not on guilt. It's important to communicate assertively, express your feelings, and stand firm in your right to make decisions that are in your best interest. Guilt trips are a form of emotional manipulation that should never be received from anyone. They target your sense of responsibility, love, and morality, twisting them to coerce you into making decisions that are not in line with your true desires or best interests. Recognizing this manipulation is the first step in breaking free from it. You have the right to set boundaries, make decisions based on your own needs, and not be made to feel guilty for doing so. Healthy relationships are built on respect, trust, and understanding, not on emotional manipulation. Therefore, never allow anyone to use guilt as a tool to control or manipulate you. Your worth is not determined by your ability to appease others. It is defined by your ability to stay true to yourself. Trust is an essential cornerstone in any healthy relationship, whether it be familial, romantic, or platonic. It is through trust that we feel safe, valued, and understood. When trust is broken or compromised, it creates a rift that is difficult to repair. One of the most damaging things anyone can experience is the deliberate breach of trust, particularly when it is done by someone they deeply care about. To receive betrayal, lies, or deceit from others can feel like a profound violation. Not only does it hurt on an emotional level, but it can leave lasting scars that diminish one's ability to trust others in the future. Betrayal often begins with the violation of an agreement or commitment. This can take many forms, from dishonesty in small matters to the more significant breach of trust, such as infidelity in a romantic relationship or betrayal in a close friendship. Lying is the most common form of dishonesty, and even white lies, when done repeatedly, can erode the trust between individuals. The hurt that comes from being lied to stems not only from the fact that the truth was withheld, but also from the realization that someone you relied on is not being truthful with you. The realization that the person you trusted has deceived you creates feelings of confusion and insecurity, and it shakes the foundation of your relationship. Deceit can also take the form of broken promises. A promise is a commitment made, an assurance that someone will act in a way that upholds their word. When that promise is broken, it undermines the very trust that was built between the two people. Trust is about reliability. It's about knowing that when someone says they will do something, they will follow through. When promises are ignored or forgotten, the relationship begins to feel fragile. A person might wonder if they can truly rely on the other individual, which leads to doubt and insecurity. Over time, broken promises can create a sense of hopelessness in the relationship. One begins to feel as though no one can be trusted, that words are meaningless, and that commitments are only fleeting. This, in turn, diminishes self-confidence and creates a negative environment where fear and suspicion take hold. In romantic relationships, betrayal takes on a different dimension, as it often involves the breaking of intimate, emotional, and even physical commitments. Infidelity is perhaps one of the most extreme forms of betrayal. It shatters the trust that forms the bedrock of the relationship and raises questions about self-worth, value, and love. The person who has been betrayed may begin to wonder if they are not good enough, or if their partner no longer cares for them. The wounds caused by infidelity are often deep and complex, as they not only involve the breaking of trust, but also the painful realization that the person they trusted gave their emotional or physical attention to someone else. This can lead to feelings of inadequacy, humiliation, and a loss of self-esteem. The emotional toll can last far beyond the actual act of betrayal, as the person who has been hurt struggles to rebuild their sense of self-worth and trust in others. Betrayal doesn't have to be as overt as infidelity or lying. It can also come in more subtle forms, like deceitful behavior or the withholding of critical information. Sometimes betrayal can come in the form of someone acting in their best interest at the expense of another person's needs. For example, a friend who shares personal information about you behind your back, or a colleague who undermines your work for personal gain is betraying the trust that was given. This type of betrayal can be especially hurtful because it often comes from someone you least expect. It leaves you questioning whether anyone is truly trustworthy or if people only act in self-interest. The pain caused by betrayal often results in a sense of disillusionment. It can be difficult to accept that someone you trusted deeply could act in such a way. It makes you question not just the relationship, but your own judgment and perceptions. You may begin to wonder whether you misread the signs, whether you were too trusting, or whether your vulnerability was taken advantage of. These doubts can lead to feelings of isolation, as the person who has been betrayed may feel hesitant to trust anyone else. The betrayal itself may cause a ripple effect, causing the individual to withdraw from others or develop trust issues that persist long after the betrayal has occurred. In some cases, the emotional wounds caused by betrayal can lead to feelings of anger and resentment. These feelings often arise from the injustice of the situation. It can be incredibly painful to realize that someone you cared for or loved intentionally hurt you. The anger comes from the perception that the betrayer took advantage of your trust, that they knowingly caused you harm. Resentment grows when the person who betrayed you does not take responsibility for their actions, offering little or no apology or recognition of the pain they caused. It's difficult to heal when the person who hurt you shows no remorse or understanding of the impact of their actions. This lack of accountability makes the healing process even more challenging, as it leaves the victim feeling unheard and invalidated. When trust is broken, it can have wider consequences beyond the individuals directly involved. Betrayal within families can create rifts that affect everyone in the family dynamic. In friendships, it can cause group divisions, with people feeling forced to choose sides. In professional environments, betrayal can lead to a breakdown in teamwork, as trust is the essential component in collaboration. Without it, relationships deteriorate, and the atmosphere becomes tense, unproductive, and emotionally draining. The aftershocks of broken trust can reach far beyond the original incident, affecting all involved parties in different ways. Betrayal is a profoundly painful experience that no one should have to endure. It fundamentally alters the dynamics of relationships, causing emotional, mental, and even physical harm. Whether through lies, broken promises, or more severe forms of deception, betrayal shakes the very foundation of trust that relationships are built upon. It leaves the person who has been hurt questioning their judgment, their self-worth, and their ability to trust others in the future. The damage caused by betrayal can be far-reaching, with effects that linger long after the betrayal itself has occurred. It's crucial to recognize the deep harm that betrayal causes, and to understand that no one should ever have to experience such a violation of trust. In relationships, trust is sacred, and once it is broken, the road to healing is long and challenging. The best way to avoid this kind of emotional trauma is to build relationships founded on mutual respect, honesty, and integrity. Only in such relationships can true, lasting trust be established. In our interactions with others, one of the most fundamental aspects of maintaining healthy relationships is the respect for personal boundaries. These boundaries serve as invisible lines that define our physical, emotional, and mental space, allowing us to feel secure, respected, and understood. When these boundaries are violated, whether intentionally or unintentionally, it can lead to feelings of discomfort, distress, and a sense of being disrespected. Boundaries are not only essential for our well-being, but they also act as a framework within which trust and mutual respect are built. To receive disrespectful or invasive behavior from someone, such as the disregard for personal boundaries, is a violation that should never be tolerated. Personal boundaries can take many forms, ranging from physical space to emotional boundaries. Physical boundaries refer to the space around us that we feel comfortable sharing with others. It includes things like how close someone can stand to us, whether they can touch us, and what kind of physical gestures are acceptable. Emotional boundaries, on the other hand, are related to the way in which we allow others to influence our feelings and thoughts. These boundaries help us define the kind of emotional intimacy and support we are willing to give and receive in relationships. Mental boundaries are about how much we allow others to shape our beliefs, thoughts, and opinions. When any of these boundaries are crossed, it can lead to a loss of autonomy and personal control, which is deeply unsettling. The disregard for personal boundaries often manifests in different forms of invasive behavior. This can be seen in situations where someone refuses to respect your need for space, whether it's physical, emotional, or mental. In romantic relationships, for example, one partner may constantly invade the other's personal space, whether by pushing for more intimacy than the other person is comfortable with or disregarding requests for alone time. In such cases, the person violating the boundary might claim that they are doing so out of love or care, but this behavior is more about control than genuine affection. When someone repeatedly ignores these boundaries, it can create a sense of powerlessness in the person being violated, as they are unable to maintain their own autonomy. In friendships, boundaries can also be disregarded in ways that cause emotional discomfort. A friend who constantly overshares personal information about you without your consent, or one who pushes you to open up before you are ready, is crossing an emotional boundary. This type of behavior can be hurtful because it places undue pressure on the individual to conform to someone else's timeline or expectations, rather than respecting their need to control their own emotional expression. This can lead to feelings of vulnerability and even resentment, as the person feels that their emotional well-being is being taken for granted. Boundary violations can be subtle, making them harder to identify, but no less damaging. This could involve a person continually making you feel guilty for not giving more of yourself, whether it's time, energy, or emotional investment. They may not ask for specific things, but instead create an environment where you feel that you should give more than you are comfortable with. For example, a colleague might repeatedly ask you to stay late at work, even though you've already made other plans. They might not directly demand it, but they use subtle pressure, such as suggesting that the team will suffer without your help, or that you are being selfish if you prioritize your personal time. This type of emotional manipulation erodes the sense of personal boundaries because it makes you feel responsible for meeting someone else's needs at the expense of your own. The violation of personal boundaries can also happen when someone oversteps their limits by involving themselves in matters that are none of their business. This might include offering unsolicited advice, criticizing choices that are deeply personal, or attempting to control decisions that should be made by the individual. For example, a family member might continuously try to influence your career choices, or a friend might constantly give unsolicited relationship advice. While the intention behind such actions may not always be malicious, they create an environment where you feel that your autonomy is being disregarded. This lack of respect for personal boundaries can cause frustration, anger, and a sense of being suffocated by others' expectations. One of the most damaging aspects of boundary violations is that they can often make the individual feel responsible for the behavior of others. This is especially true when the person violating your boundaries insists that their actions are for your own good, or that you should be more accommodating to their needs. The manipulative nature of this behavior can make it difficult to assert your own boundaries without feeling guilty or selfish. For example, someone might say, "If you really cared about me, you would do this for me," or "I thought we were close enough that you would want to help." These statements subtly shift the responsibility for the boundary violation onto the person whose boundaries are being crossed, making them feel as though they are the ones at fault for not being more accommodating. Such emotional manipulation can have a long-lasting impact on an individual's mental health. Over time, continuous violations of personal boundaries can lead to feelings of anxiety, depression, and self-doubt. If a person is constantly being pushed beyond their limits and is unable to assert their own boundaries, they may start to feel like they are losing a sense of self. The more someone else controls their actions, emotions, or decisions, the more the individual may struggle to recognize their own needs and desires. This loss of self-awareness and autonomy is damaging not only to the person's emotional state, but also to their overall well-being. It's important to recognize the signs of boundary violations early and take steps to assert oneself. Setting clear boundaries with others and communicating them effectively is crucial to maintaining a sense of personal autonomy. This includes being clear about your physical, emotional, and mental needs, and not being afraid to say no when something feels uncomfortable or overbearing. Boundaries are a form of self-respect, and it is essential to honor them for the sake of your own mental health and well-being. Whether personal or professional, it's vital to establish and maintain boundaries that reflect your values and needs. People who truly care about you will respect these boundaries and will not pressure you to sacrifice your well-being for their benefit. While setting boundaries may sometimes be uncomfortable, especially if the other person is not accustomed to them, it is necessary for healthy interactions and mutual respect. Personal boundaries are essential to our emotional, mental, and physical well-being. When someone disregards or violates these boundaries, they create an environment where the individual feels disrespected, powerless, and overwhelmed. Boundary violations come in many forms, whether they are subtle or overt, but they all have one thing in common: they undermine the autonomy of the person whose boundaries are being crossed. It is crucial to recognize the importance of boundaries in maintaining healthy, respectful relationships, and to understand that no one should ever have to tolerate behavior that disrespects their personal space and autonomy. Setting boundaries is an act of self-respect, and it is vital to uphold them for the sake of one's mental and emotional health. A relationship based on mutual respect for boundaries is one that fosters trust, love, and understanding, allowing both individuals to thrive.